Hello, I'm Dr. Steve Hassan. Welcome to my live stream, May 14th. It's 1 o'clock Eastern, and welcome for all of my listeners who are joining me live. And this will be recorded, so you can, if you're listening later, I'm intending to do lives as regularly as I can. And this week, we will be featuring the podcast that I did with David Pakman, the YouTuber. Good book, a very interesting conversation. There's so much news I want to comment on about immigration. The judge that was arrested was formally charged, criminally charged, for allegedly helping someone escape ICE. There was video that was posted in Worcester, Massachusetts, my state, where agents were chasing women immigrants allegedly and manhandling them. And it's a very upsetting time where even people who are naturalized Americans with green cards are being questioned on whether or not they're saying negative things publicly. Academics here are now being interviewed and questioned. Harvard is fighting the Trump administration's demand that they determine what can be taught and what can't be taught at Harvard. And I know a lot of other schools feel the same. Some other news things before I take questions and comments involves Trump in Qatar being offered a $400 million luxury jet. That is supposed to not happen because of the quid pro quo nature. It should be voted on by Congress. And apparently Trump doesn't care what people are saying. He likes the new jet and he wants to use it and have it afterward, $400 million. And people forget that Qatar was involved with Hamas, is involved with Hamas and allegedly state actor terrorism. And normalized relations now with Syria, which was friends with Putin's Russia. People forget that Putin was backing Assad through all those years. And Tulsi Gabbard, the director of national intelligence, involved with Chris Butler's Science of Identity, Krishna cult, used to be a paid lobbyist for Qatar. So what's happening? What's happened to the country that we have known? And South Africans, 50 were brought in and put in Idaho, the seat of white supremacist militias, which was totally bizarre and weird. So lots of things on people's minds. All I can say is I'm hearing more and more about disaffected Trump voters, especially with this looming bill that's being proposed that will slash Medicaid. And I am preparing some videos for social media with interviews of vets, for example, that say without their Medicaid, they will die. Like they need Medicaid to be able to live and get the treatment that they need. So all I can say is active resistance. And of course, you're here with me. So freedom of mind. I always say it's your mind and only you should control it. And the fate of the planet as I see it, especially with AI and the internet surveillance that is being developed after Musk hacked our computer system, and China has been hacking our systems for years. Everyone needs to know about the influence continuum and the bite model, and understand that we need to discern what's legitimate fact-based information or what isn't. And with Trump unfunding scientific institutions that we all depend on for weather and climate to know if there's a tornado coming or flood watch, and RFK with his ridiculous comments, we need to all rally together and actively resist. So that's my opening few comments. I can tell you that we at Freedom of Mind are committed to human rights, women's rights, gay rights, trans rights, indigenous rights, rights of minorities. And we believe that former members of authoritarian cults have a unique role to play to share our stories, to destigmatize the idea that people can be tricked and brainwashed into believing false prophets and people who are malignant narcissists. Okay, we're hearing from Sandra. We should never want cults to be made better, but only seek for them to break apart and be demolished. Thank you for continuing to expose Trump's agenda. Highly recommend that everyone read the book on tyranny. That's Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny. Yes, I highly recommend that. And regarding cults, and especially groups like the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Mormons, I have a little different take, Sandra. I believe in being in the here and now, looking at the positive future that we want. And organizations, in my opinion, if they start uh, accounting for the lies they've taught, the harms they've done, changing policies, changing structures, um, if they want to continue to exist but become law abiding and not taking advantage of their members, not breaking up families. There was a news story this week that a woman died in the Jehovah's Witnesses because she refused the blood transfusion during childbirth. And now the child's mother is dead because she was following her indoctrination from the Watchtower Society. Margaret, what warning signs should Americans look for that indicate Trump's leadership is shifting from populism to full-blown cult-style authoritarianism? Well, I've never thought that his approach was populism, honestly, even in his first run as president. But what's clear is that he's following Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, and he's put into positions, including all the top officials in the administration, people who are loyal to him, people who support his lie that he won the 2020 election. They're kissing his ring and being loyal to him. And my hope is that Republican congressmen and senators, even though they're afraid of breaking ranks and voting against policies and tactics, that they're going to realize that history will judge them, and they are aligning with a full-blown fascist, authoritarian, malignant narcissist, as I said in my book. And a cult that has authoritarian cults in it. And Putin and Russia is deeply involved, and has been for decades. So let's move on. Let's see. Herb Lovies was just listening to Conspirituality podcast, Ed Craig Johnson, How to Talk to Your Son About Fascism. They don't really believe MAGA is a cult because it's too large. There are people out there who supposedly present themselves as understanding cults and mind control, who have said that this is not valid, and they haven't read it, and they don't know what they're talking about. So I say, be a good consumer, listen to their argument, listen to my arguments, and make a decision for yourself. I remember in 1989, when combating cult mind control first came out, I started receiving many letters from ex-Jehovah's Witnesses thanking me for the book and asking me why I didn't mention the Watchtower and the witnesses. And at the time I said, why are they a mind control cult? To which they said, we underlined the whole book. Are you kidding? Of course. And I said, teach me. So I went to Michael Langone of ICSA, a former director of ICSA, who, by the way, said that the cult of Trump is not a cult, and he too disagreed with my thesis. I doubt he read my book. But he said to me, oh, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they can't be a cult because they're too large. And I said, since when is largeness the criteria for behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotional control, which are the four overlapping components that validates Robert Lifton, Margaret Singer, Edgar Schein's work, Jolly West's work. And I have publicly stated China is an authoritarian mind control cult, left-wing communist cult, and they got over 1.5 billion people in it. So size is not the criteria, but are they respecting conscience? Are they respecting free flow of information? Can you question? Can you leave without fear of harassment and intimidation or a penalty? So these are the variables that freedom of mind and my work says that we need to be paying attention to. Barbara, how can Republicans in the House be convinced they should listen to their constituents over the Trump threats? Very good question. So the more of their constituents that show up picketing their offices, messaging them, reaching out to message to their family, their friends, their former work colleagues, if they were lawyers. And we have to create a meta-narrative that makes them feel it's critical that they not just kowtow and fit in, but become a heroic resistor and do the right thing, even if it means they are afraid that they're going to get threats or harassment. I don't know if more Republicans will start speaking out against Trump, but that's my hope. And my hope is that the Supreme Court will get a backbone, and they really made a big mistake to let Trump be immune and say that he's above prosecution. That's my understanding. So let's see. Casey on TikTok says one problem is that his followers overlap with other cults. They believe their God protects them. Absolutely. As I wrote in The Cult of Trump, there are many Christian nationalist cults, dominionism cults, New Apostolic Reformation cults that have a leader who says, I'm a prophet or I'm an apostle and I speak to God, and God told me that Trump's his man, and that the Democrats and all critics and opponents are demons and are Satan's agents. That's cult mindset. That's a cult mind control thing. And so what doesn't work is attacking Trump directly or attacking the leader, the doctrine, or the policy directly and arguing rationally with logic and facts. But warm, curious, engaged, active listening with follow-up questions to remind people who they were, what their values are, what Americans' values are supposed to be, and reality testing, encouraging them to reality test. And before I answer the next question or comment, I'll just say talking about Chinese communist brainwashing is a step in the right direction, or talking about pimps and traffickers and how they groom and recruit and indoctrinate false identities into sex and labor traffic victims. Renee, yes, MAGA, Make America Great Again, is likely too large and too politically mainstream to be considered a cult in the former sociological sense. So all I can say is that regarding sociology, as Big Tobacco hired so-called experts to say there was no causal link between tobacco smoking and lung cancer, which was a lie, and they knew it, but they used these experts to do disinformation. Fossil fuel companies did the same playbook with so-called experts who questioned whether or not there was proof that human were influencing climate change through fossil fuels, using my former cult, the Moonies, the Washington Times, as a major climate science denier. Authoritarian cults have their sociologists of religion who say there's no such thing as brainwashing, there's no such thing as mind control. You can't ever trust a former member or a critic of a cult because they're a new religious movement. So we can listen to those disinformation experts who are in the under the influence of authoritarian cults, who don't want to lose their tax exemption status, want the public to remain ignorant with clouds in their mind around, well, nobody can tell what's a real cult and what's an authoritarian cult and what's a legitimate religion. I believe legitimate religions are about love, respect for conscience, respect for creativity, respect for free will and critical thinking, and not a pseudo self that's dependent on fear and guilt and control and obedience. And the key is the pseudo self. That's my model. That's my life work. And I should say on Sunday, May 11th, I celebrated my 49th anniversary of the day when I realized Moon wasn't the Messiah. And I started to think for myself again that he was a liar and he was untrustworthy. And therefore, he couldn't be a man of God. And therefore, why would I stay in this group, even if I had position and power in it? And that was when the lights turned on, and here I am 49 years later, continuing to try my best to warn people and to explain what I've learned over these decades. Let's see, Claire, how do Trump's immigration policies, like using Guantánamo Bay for migrants or ending birthrights, fit into the psychological playbook of authoritarian or cultic control? Thanks for this question. It's very, very important question, actually. And I'm going to cite a 1954 book by Eric Hoffer called The True Believer. And while Eric was writing about communists, he talked about how a mass movement, he didn't, by the way, use the term cult. He said mass movements strength can be measured by the vividness and tangibility of their devils. And every authoritarian playbook has its enemies, and immigrants are Trump's Jews, what Hitler used to blame all the woes of Germany in the 30s and 40s, was blaming the Jews and the gypsies and the gay people, etc. Trump's playbook is immigrants. And for those who don't believe that white nationalism and racism and the Koch corporation's roots in the John Birch Society is involved here, you're wrong, in my opinion. So understand that we're facing a moment in history where there has been a coup of Russia and authoritarians who want to dismantle America's hegemony of the world. And it's really upsetting, but it makes me feel even more energized to know that my work has never been more important to get the message out. So I really want to encourage you, if you haven't read The Cult of Trump or listened to it, it's in libraries if you can't afford to buy a copy. Please read it and share it with people. Let's see, scarves. Why are there so many JW churches in Fiji? I don't know that there are many JW churches in Fiji, but I can tell you there are many cults in Fiji because past administrations have been very look the other way-ish when it comes to mind control cults. One of the most notorious cults was Da Free John, or Franklin Jones, who was given an island in Fiji. And if you don't know who this guy is, bad news, authoritarian mind control person. But cults are very big ones that have recruited wealthy people with power and influence. They look for countries and places where they can buy the authorities off and continue to operate. So that's what I have to say about that. And I'm really hopeful that more and more former Jehovah's Witnesses, former Mormons will be sharing their stories. I'm seeing more podcasts emerging. And the biggest one for ex-Mormons is Mormon Stories podcast that my colleague John Dolin continues to do excellent work about. Let's see, Lily, are you familiar with Dominion theology? Yes, Seven Mountain Dominionism was written about by Lance Wallnau. It's in the Cult of Trump book. The idea is, unlike what Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world, or render unto Caesar what's Caesar's, like stay out of politics, or that as you minister to the lowest in society, you're ministering to me, and rich people will have a very hard time getting into the kingdom of heaven. Seven Mountain Dominionists believe they need to take over politically. So the seven mountains, I don't know if I'll be able to recount them all off the top of my head, but things like politics, business, family, religion, media. And guess who's head of the media for Seven Mountain Dominionism? I believe it's Mark Burnett, the guy who groomed Trump on The Apprentice show to convince people he was a successful businessman when he has been an abject failure. A man who was raised in an authoritarian family that was racist, involved with a cult of Norman Vincent Peale, the power of positive thinking. So more and more people who know the Bible are speaking up, writing books. And if you identify as a Christian, listen to them. And I forgot to mention in my opening comments, Pope Leo is the first American pope, and probably high up in terms of the power to match Donald Trump, because he's got over 1 billion Catholics who believe that he is a legitimate spiritual leader, and he's talking for peace and love and protecting immigrants. And he worked as a pastor in Chile for many years. So this is really, really a hopeful sign that one of the MAGA Catholic Opus Dei contingents didn't put a pope in place. And American cardinals, who knows what's going to happen if they talk about Pope Leo as being of Satan. Who knows if they're no longer going to be cardinals in the Catholic Church anymore. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Let's see, enigmatic. You can utilize 5 calls to reach out to your representatives. I'm not sure what 5 calls is, but there are apps and websites that have lists of local representatives as well as Republicans. But my sense is that Republican congressmen and senators will respond much more from a constituent who lives in their community and identifies themselves as such. And we should all be getting to know each other's neighbors in real life and not just online, because we're human beings, we're embodied spirits. Let's see. Tate or Tate on TikTok says, my Mormon Utah friends regret voting for him. A lot of people are starting to see through him. I assume see through Trump. Yeah, I was honestly shocked when Mitt Romney did a thumbs up for one aspect of Trump's impeachment, and shocked that the entire Mormon true believers turned on their former bishop and the former GOP presidential candidate, treating him like a pariah because he did the right thing by saying that Trump was guilty. And so everyone has their own tipping point. And we know as human beings, we like to have believe in an identity that we're good people and we have good values. And so it's hard for us to say we got tricked or that we believed a liar, and to say, okay, reboot, I made a mistake, and move forward. But that's what we call heroic resistors. And I'm calling on people to act with good conscience. I made a mistake getting recruited into the Moonies and doing all the terrible fascist things I did for the Moonies. And I left realizing if they could trick me, they could. I saw how they were mind controlling really smart people. Let's see, scarves. Is Baha'i a cult? So for me, I come back to this. And the issue is within the BITE model, if it's doing BITE, then it's an authoritarian cult. If it's respecting people's conscience and abilities, it still might be referred to as a cult, but not a dangerous, destructive cult. So that's how I use the term cult. And if you go to bitemodel.com, a free anonymous survey, I'm a Fielding Fellow scholar at the Institute for Social Innovation. When you do the free anonymous BITE model 40-question survey, it will ask you if you're a fringe member or if you're a rank and file person or a devotee or a leader, so that we're gathering data on groups. So if you are a Baha'i or know a lot about Baha'i, go to bitemodel.com and fill it out to the best of your knowledge. And it will actually give you a number on authoritarian scale of how authoritarian it is. So, and then you can let me know, and you can fill out the BITE model on freedomofmind.com in detail and send it in to us. We have databases for groups. Seeking truth. Is Trump still actively working with the Moonies? I heard he has a group of advisors which consists of religious people and the Moonies among them. Absolutely. Yes, yes, yes. So for those of you who may not know the Moonies, especially young people, I have on my YouTube channel an old BBC documentary called Emperor of the Universe. You can check it out. I have some videos also that I was interviewed where I'm explaining the moon cult and its history, etc. And they still own the Washington Times, and Sean Moon has a crown of AR-15 golden bullets, and he has the Rod of Iron Ministries.org that and was going around the country before the last election with Michael Flynn, having Rod of Iron freedom festivals, recruiting people for militias. And the Moonies have 2 training compounds, one in Tennessee and one near Waco, Texas. And so the Moonies are very much involved with the Trump cult. And I have posted previously, a few weeks after the January 6th violent coup attempt, Hak Jahan, Moon's widow, the head of the main branch of the cult, paid Donald Trump $2.5 million to endorse her and the movement. A lot of people don't know that. So here's another bigger point I want to share, and that is that cults are using freedom of religion as a banner, a smokescreen to say, we can't judge anything if it's a religion. And I say we can judge based on behavior, information control, thought control, and emotional control and their consequences. But they want the public to be ignorant and to say, oh, we can't tell if something is a legitimate religion or not. I think any group that lies, either overtly lying, withholding vital information, distorting information to recruit people in, should not have any IRS exemptions. It's a crime to change an odometer on a used car. Why? Because the person who's changing the odometer is tricking the public, and for the public good, it says the odometer reading should be accurate. Well, a legitimate religious group should never lie to get people involved. Let's see. Thank you so much for your work. I'm an XJW. I really appreciate your work as a whole. Thank you. Keeps me going to know that people are understanding my work and learning and teaching others, because we need to have a multiplication effect. And please, if you're not following me on social media, please do. We're going to be developing my YouTube platform, Dr. Stephen Hassan, much more in the coming weeks with some premium content. Let's see, are you aware of health coaches practicing NLP for chronic illness, selling courses, affiliate links, pushing coaches? I'm afraid so. We did a Psychology Today blog about the wellness industry and how they are using covert hypnotic manipulations and techniques. NLP stands for Neuro-Linguistic Programming, which was developed by Grinder and Bandler based on the work of the psychiatrist Milton Erickson. And Milton Erickson was the founder of the American Society of Clinical Hypnosis, but I also want to say the CIA consulted with him for MK Ultra. So to your question, am I aware that they are recruiting and indoctrinating? Absolutely, I am aware of it, as I'm aware of large group awareness training cults, and crypto is, in my opinion, a multi-level marketing type cult. So comes in many forms. Undue influence comes in many forms. Kayla, why do so many people still support Trump even when his policy seems to hurt the very communities that back him? When will they wake up? So have you ever heard of a sunk cost fallacy? Have You ever heard that term? It's a very well understood concept that human beings, when they make a commitment and then another commitment, or the commitment goes on over time, the more they don't want to exit, because they somehow are believing magically that things are going to get better. So an example of sunk cost fallacies is you decide you're going to walk 2 miles to a special store to buy something that only they carry. And you walk 1.75 miles, and then you realize it's Sunday and the store is closed. And do you keep walking the next 1/4 mile when you realize that it's closed and you can't get what you were intending to get, or do you keep walking? So it's a similar concept where people vote and people around them voted for Trump, and somebody has to be the heroic resistor and start saying, I'm not happy. I want my health care. I want my Social Security. I want my Medicare. I don't want to subsidize billionaire oligarchs. And then there will be a contagion effect amongst the people who know they're a good person. And so there'll be more and more people waking up. And I'm predicting there will be millions of ex-members from the MAGA cult in the coming months. I don't think it'll take years, but the sooner the better. And I really am looking to former members to understand and be able to welcome people exiting instead of saying, I told you so. I told you it was a cult. Which, fortunately, when I got out of the Moonies, there weren't too many of my friends who did that wagging of the finger. Mostly everybody was just so grateful and happy to see the real me back again and welcomed me back. And let me tell you, I was embarrassed. I was ashamed. I was confused. I was trying to sort it out. How could I have ever stayed in this group doing the terrible things that I did and believing the terrible things that I believed? But I got better. I got clearer and clearer and clearer. Let's see. David Wicklin, with all the economic uncertainty post-COVID, post-inflation, I'm seeing a lot of ads for these life empowerment gurus like Tony Robbins or Grant Cardone, largely aimed at getting wealthy. Cultish? My first reaction is, what do you think, Dave? And then my second reaction is, since you're asking me, yes, for sure. For sure. So I'm not a fan of Tony Robbins. I think that Tony Robbins, because he made a deal with Grinder and Bandler to teach NLP but not call it NLP, is making a fortune teaching other people how to do life coaching. I think Grant Cardone is involved with Scientology. And they're going to use whatever hooks they think is going to make them the most amount of money. And often it's a get rich quick scheme. That's what multi-level marketing cults depend on. Buy Trump's crypto and you'll make a fortune. And the last round, I think 29 people made money and 700,000 lost money. Understand, research, look for experts that have credentials, who have a track record, who are trustworthy. I can tell you, I will never lie to you. Truth matters to me. Evidence matters to me. I'm open to changing my mind. If I believe something and it's proven to be not correct, I will change my mind and apologize publicly. Decorate life. Are all the orgs in your drop down really cults like AA, etc.? Thank you for asking that. No, no, no. So that is not a list of destructive cults. In fact, my my professors said in order to do a proper scientific study of this, you need to include groups that are healthy and invite people to fill out the form for healthy relationships and groups. And when it comes to 12-step programs like AA, I've heard from people who said it was life-changing and life-saving. And I've heard from people who said that they felt like it was very cultish. And from my investigation of it, there are problematic beliefs, like you have to believe in a higher power, or that you have to define your identity forever as an alcoholic or a substance abuser. I don't believe in defining your life based on a bad practice of the past. And I think there are many other ways to not be an alcoholic or addicted to substances. I do believe in ethical clinical hypnotherapy as a powerful technique for people to gain mastery and control and self-knowledge, for example. And there's unethical hypnosis, and in particular NLP-ish quick fix things where they're going to teach you how to seduce a woman in 15 minutes, or going to teach you how to get people to turn over their wealth to you and do an inheritance thing. So again, it's everything that has the power to help has the power to hurt too. So when it comes to mind control, I'm going to say it one more time. I believe it's your mind and only you should control it. And in order to control it, you need to have very strict understanding of your values and your beliefs. And you need to know how the brain works, neuroscience. You need to understand social psychology. And you need people that are trustworthy to bounce ideas off of. That's what's going to be critical going forward. Thoughts on the Salvation Army? I've heard some very, very bad things about the Salvation Army after believing it was a great group for many decades. I've heard from former members of the Salvation Army. And another point that I want to say that I'm very worried about going forward is that the internet is getting scrubbed of critical websites and data about cults. Some of these websites are coming down because of lawsuit threats. But they're still up on archive.org if you remember the URL. And this is one of the many projects that needs to be taken up to save the critical stories and information about cult leaders and the history of the group, etc. Karen, hey, Dr. Hassan, did you see Lawrence O'Donnell's The Last Word on May 7th? He referenced the dangerous case of Donald Trump by 37 psychiatrists. Is this a good sign in your opinion? So I know Bandy Lee, forensic psychiatrist. I've interviewed Bandy, and I've gone to Washington to the last edition release, the most dangerous case of Donald Trump, which was the third book that Bandy did, or maybe it's the fourth. I didn't see Lawrence O'Donnell's, but what I want to say is that the media has censored Bandy and myself and other mental health professionals, and because of the bogus Goldwater rule, which was something that was set out by the American Psychiatric Association for their members, of which Bandy is not a member, and nor am I. But Bandy Lee is someone worth reading her books and understanding. Donald Trump is not fit to govern the United States of America. He is mentally disturbed and a very dangerous person. Mitch Kale, thanks, Dr. Hassan. I'm meeting with Bandy every Friday. We just shifted from the topic of structural violence and how it promotes someone like Trump who promises the world and delivers nothing. Bandy just shifted to the topic of pandemic prevention for the future and what to do if a pandemic starts to avoid the COVID-19 fiasco Trump created, which contributed to mass death. Yeah, so I don't have her books within reach because I'm wearing a headset, but I recommend coming to my Substack, watch my interviews with Bandy Lee. And she has her own platforms and meets with subscribers. Check her out. She's worthwhile. Let's see. Summer Bummer on TikTok says, just bought your book, Combating Cult Mind Control. Thank you. I'm an ex-Jehovah's Witness. I love referring back to the Bite model to explain why Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult. Yes, thank you. The thing is that my Bite model is based on Robert Lifton's 8 criteria from his 1961 book on Chinese communist brainwashing, called Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. Margaret Singer, who also studied Chinese communist brainwashing, had the 6 conditions model. And I was using Leon Festinger's cognitive dissonance model, which is thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and I added information control as a framework to understand how people can be brainwashed and why trafficking experts, labor trafficking, and sex trafficking experts like my Bite model is you can read each variable: sleep deprivation, clothing manipulation, food manipulation, and you can go down the list and check off, is it there or isn't it? And I should say that my 132 question, which is you can download for free on freedomofmind.com, has only 40 of the highest loading factors, and you can get a number for whatever group you want to apply to it and understand how controlling and authoritarian it is. And Hannah on TikTok says, thank you, Dr. Hassan. You've been so valuable to so many of us and that you keep educating. And heart, thank you. That means a lot to me. And please help us spread the word. And please listen to my podcast. Check out my blogs with my video interviews. And I think the last I saw, I have 133,000 followers on Instagram, which is now my most popular social media. My Twitter/X has gone down since Elon Musk took it over. No great surprise. I continue to message on there. I started a Blue Sky account, a much smaller number on Blue Sky at the moment, and doing some notes on Substack, etc. We're just trying to get the word out, and people say they like the live streams in addition to my podcasts and my social media posts. So, and I like interacting with folks and plan to do more in the future. Let's see, enigmatic porcupine. When you use the term hypnosis and mind control, what do you mean? I feel like mainstream use of it in entertainment makes it seem like a thing of fiction. Good question. So I first learned about hypnosis 4 years after I got out of the Moonies, and it was in the context of going to an NLP workshop taught by one of the co-founders, Richard Bandler. And as I wrote in Combating Cult Mind Control, I wanted to learn more and did a deep dive, even moved to Santa Cruz, was invited to be an apprentice to John Grinder. And I wanted to understand that hypnosis is a state of mind that feels nice. It can be a flow state. But the vulnerability with hypnosis is your critical thinking is offline. So if someone has a hidden agenda that you don't agree with, they can put ideas in your head without you critically understanding and consciously understanding it. And I want to state again that I believe in ethical hypnosis done by mental health professionals who have a sworn ethical creed, do no harm, and help the client to be their best self, versus people who are trying to sell or recruit people into MLMs or cult groups and such. And what I mean by mind control is my bite model of authoritarian control. Come to freedomofmind.com under Learn, and you can download for free in English or now in Spanish, the influence continuum, the bite model, even my doctoral dissertation where I review the major models of brainwashing as I describe how we can use trafficking laws to as a platform for explaining to judges and juries what brainwashing is. Let's see, artist Christina M. Anderson, do you think ex-MAGA will eventually unleash on Trump the way they went rabid on January 6th, or does getting out of a cult mindset calm an individual's anger? I don't know. I can tell you that anger, when one gets out of a cult, is a sign of psychological well-being, actually. It's something that I look for when people get past the feeling ashamed, embarrassed, not sure if they're making the right decision to leave the group. When somebody exits fully and understands how they've been harmed and all the time that was wasted, or how their labor was used for free, or how loved ones were cut off from them, they often get very angry. So I'm not sure that that is not going to happen with ex-MAGA people. In fact, I predict they'll probably be pretty darn angry at Trump and how Trump played them and conned them. And all I can say is that the cure to blind faith is perspective. And it really helps if you're leaving a particular cult to learn about other cults. And so there are documentaries that have been done on cults. There are many podcasts, including my Cult Conversations Influence Continuum podcast and video, that will help people have a perspective to see how the content of the beliefs may be different, how the leaders may be different leaders, but at the structure, it's all about creating a pseudo-identity that's dependent and obedient, and to not listen to your conscience, not make your own decisions, and suppress your feelings out of phobia indoctrination, fear indoctrination. Let's see, Jamie Harding, recovering from Pentecostal Christianity, former youth pastor, worship leader, and missionary, in the process of rethinking my beliefs or lack thereof. Hi, Jamie. I have a podcast coming out soon by my interview with Elle Hardy. Her book is on the floor. I'm looking down at it. It's called Beyond Belief, How Pentecostal Christianity is Taking Over the World. You're going to love the interview. You may want to pick up the book ahead of this. I'm sure Elle has done other interviews of interest. And welcome to Freedom of Mind. Let's see. Focus Lady, any thoughts about how to avoid triggering the retaliatory response of cultist relatives, in addition to not criticizing the leader and asking open-ended questions? They call 9/11 in a red state. Let me see if I understand what you're asking. How to avoid triggering people in MAGA? Is that the question? I don't know that you can totally avoid triggering other people, but paying attention that you might use a word, a concept, show them a video or a book that might anger them. So you have to make note of, oh, that triggered them. They're not rational at this moment. They're very emotional and angry. And the key thing I teach family and friends who are trying to rescue a loved one is you need to control yourself from getting triggered. And that's an art to how to stay resourceful when you're being attacked or accused, or your relative is having this reaction. And all I can say is with practice, you get better and better at it. And I recommend to people often it's easier to practice on someone else's relative than on yours, because you don't have the history and the emotional volatility that of getting triggered. Um, and so uh, I did start a book on how to talk to family and friends in MAGA. It's not finished yet, but it's on my list of projects to do as we're reorienting freedom of mind to be more effective. So stay tuned. And I want to plug the course workbook we just published. It's an Above the Freedom of Mind book over my shoulder, and has links to a lot of my most important interviews and resources. And this workbook was meant to accompany my online course for clinicians, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, counselors for CEs, and we have a version that's non-CEs for anyone else who wants to get a deeper dive in understanding cults. Let's see, we're wrapping up soon, but Jamie Harding, speaking of hypnosis, I would be wondering if it's possible for hypnosis to be performed via social media postings. Yes, absolutely. I recommend you go to humanetech.com. That's the Center for Humane Technology, humanetech.org. I was interviewed for their Your Undivided Attention podcast about this very topic, about how social media and doom scrolling. Doom scrolling is an example of being in a hypnotic state where you lose time. And again, the issue is it's a normal state to go into trances, to daydream, to fantasize, to imagine athletes' performances. They perform it, visualize it, etc. But when you're in that state, you're more vulnerable to getting indoctrinated. And that's where a lot of minds have gotten hacked into believing Trump is for God and the Democrats are for evil. Time Lord, hey, Dr. Hassan, just wanted to let you know almost all the current governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses have been subpoenaed to court in New York. Keep up the good work. I didn't know that. Please email us at center@freedomofmind.com. As news stories break, you can let us know and we'll amplify messaging, because we have a lot of folks now paying attention to the Freedom of Mind channel and myself. And I also am aware that the Parliament in Australia is opening up an investigation into coercive control and mind control cults. And I was watching a video by a former member this morning from Down Under, where she was saying that some major Christian body opposed the parliamentary investigation and more or less was repeating the same cult disinformation tactic that you can't tell a religion from a cult, which is nonsense. A destructive cult does destructive behaviors. And the results, I want to quote the Bible. Forgive me, I'm Jewish, but I'm going to quote the New Testament. You will know a tree by the fruit it bears. A good tree bears good fruit, and a bad tree bears bad fruit. That's common sense. We all need to come back to common sense and looking at behaviors and not listening to words or following beliefs that we may want to have, but looking more realistic at reality. Keith says, hasn't hypnosis been taking place over the past 15 to 20 years, gradually with reinforcement within closed Facebook groups and platforms such as Rumble? These echo chambers need to be addressed. Yeah, I was just reading something about Rumble and a Canadian MAGA. It's a major indoctrination, recruitment, and indoctrination thing. The internet is employing neuroscience, tracking our likes, our dislikes, how long we're on a particular thing, even tracking our eye movement patterns, etc. And so there's more and more AI being used now to gather our data that will then could be potentially used to brainwash us into authoritarianism. That's why I think we need to be very careful how much time we spend on the internet, on our cell phones, on social media, and put more time in real life to friends, family, being in nature, doing things that help us be real and human. And with that, our hour has flown by. I want to thank my Freedom of Mind team. Interesting times we're living in, but we can help each other, lift each other up, empower and encourage each other. And remember, it's your mind that only you should control it. Take care.